This is the Palin Update on SaraNet Radio. I'm Kevin Scholla.
You know, I am tolerant, and I have a very diverse family and group of friends, and even within that group you would see some who may not agree with me on this issue, some very dear friends who don't agree with me on this issue.
We've already heard from the likes of Newt Gingrich, Rick Santorum, and Michelle Bachmann. Today, a candidate you might not have heard of, but he's hoping to change that. Republican presidential hopeful Fred Karger is here as our presidential series continues. Also, we examine the amazing impact of Palin power. Mama Grizzly really flexing her kingmaker muscles of late. First, our interview segment. Fred Karger, Republican candidate for president. Thanks for joining us on the Palin Update on SaraNet Radio.
Thanks, Kevin. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Now, first off, we see how Gary Johnson was squeezed out of most debates, so much so that he's left the Republican Party. He's now running as a Libertarian. John Huntsman also was left out of some debates, but they had it far better than you. You're in yet another tier, if you will, people not giving you much attention. Is that frustrating, and what have you been doing to compensate?
Well, yeah, it is frustrating because, I'm a first-time candidate. I've been involved in politics for 30 years. As a political consultant campaign manager, but this is the first time I've ever run for office, and I'm doing it because I'm concerned about our country, and I feel I should be included in these debates. And, when I was left off the polls, I fought to get on the polling. When I met the Fox requirement back in August, I did meet their criteria to be in the Iowa debate in Ames by scoring 1% in 5 national polls. I actually did in 6. Well, they changed the rules, and I filed a complaint with the FEC against them. And, that's the problem I've had. Now that I've been left out of those early debates, it's a lot harder for me to make my stand and get in a debate, which, of course, is necessary to compete with the big boys.
Now, you are openly gay and really the first openly gay person to officially run for president in a major party. Tell us how that's gone for you and what the response has been.
Well, it opened some doors for me and also slammed some in my face. I'm fighting right now to get a booth at the CPAC conference in February. Last year, they told me that I was late in applying, even though I applied in December, and that they sold out. Well, I know for a fact Gary Johnson and others got booths after that time I was told they were sold out. So this time I applied in November and got the early bird discount, but I still have not heard. So, they are keeping me out because I'm gay, and I will take some action against that if they continue to do that. So, it's been a real roller coaster. I've been treated extremely well by the Republican Party, from Reince Priebus and Sharon Day and Jeff Larson, the 3 top leaders of the RNC, met with me and my communications director last March in Washington, the day before I filed. All the state, county parties have been treating me real well, but some of these third-party groups like CPAC and Faith and Freedom Coalition out in Iowa and others have shunned me, and that's too bad. But that's I guess part of the price you pay for being a pioneer.
Tell us a little bit about your political background. People hear gay Republican candidate, and I think a lot immediately think, okay, here's an activist with no substance. But you've done some big work in several administrations.
Well, yes, I worked for a guy named Bill Roberts, and he and his ex-business partner, Stu Spencer, had a firm, Spencer Roberts. They ran Ronald Reagan's first 2 campaigns for governor. They were the preeminent political consultants on the Republican side. I worked for Bill when he started his new company, the Dolphin Group. He hired me for 3 months back in 1977 on a special election, and I retired 27 years later. And we worked on something like 9 presidential campaigns, dozens of other elections out in California and all over the West. I did a lot of federal work on behalf of corporate clients. So I know government well. I know the inefficiency of the federal government because I've had to deal with it from the outside. But I've never run for office before. I've worked, I've consulted, I've been in the room and negotiated debates and done everything except be that candidate. And I led a double life. I was always gay. I was partnered. I mean, I knew from a very early age, but I knew it was not very a big attribute in Republican politics, particularly on the 70s and 80s and even into the 90s. So I stayed in the closet. I led that double life until I came kind of bursting out of the closet. And I did become a gay activist in 2008 on Proposition 8 and kept watch on a lot of the big donors to the Yes on 8 campaign, boycotted 4 of them. And during that summer 2008, now that my big secret was out publicly, I had nothing holding me back from running for office. And I'm very disillusioned with Obama. I think he's a disaster, way over his head. You know, I decided to step up and run for president. I was also very concerned about the direction of the Republican Party. I think we're losing the whole center of the Republican Party, and particularly for our future younger people who are just so put off by the Republican Party's far rightward movement that they are not participating. So, you know, those are 2 major reasons I decided to run for president.
And you're also an actor, so a gay actor just screams Republican, right?
There have been a couple of those. We even had George Murphy, former song and dance man who was a United States Senator from California. And my boss, Bill Roberts, ran his campaign too. So, you know, it does help. I did that in the early and mid-'70s, so it's been a while. My acting skills I have to get a little polished up. But, you know, I studied speech communication in college. I'm a pretty good speaker. I've gotten a lot better. I think the communication skills are so important. You know, look at Sarah Palin, for example. She's a master, you know, and I met her early on back in Alaska in the 90s when she was mayor of Wasilla. And, you know, we were all quite taken by her. I knew her campaign consultant at the time who had her speak at a lunch, and she's always had that incredible ability to communicate and, you know, like none other really, light up a room or light up a convention hall. And, you know, that's really important, obviously, in this communication era we're in, and particularly with all the social media and new media, becomes even more important.
Kevin Scholla on the Palin Update on SaraNet Radio. We're speaking with GOP presidential hopeful Fred Karger, and I do want to get to your meeting with Sarah Palin in a moment, but first, people don't usually associate gays and Republicans, but you pointed out in the past that gay Americans have voted for the GOP a bit more than folks may think in the past couple of elections.
Well, yeah, the exit polls are showing, you know, like 2 years ago that 31% of the votes, and this is when the Republican takeover of Congress occurred, you know, were Republicans. And with the McCain-Palin year, it was something like, you know, 21%, they say, gay Republicans voting. You know, it's becoming more and more difficult to be a gay Republican because all the bad stuff that's happened in my lifetime against my community has come from Republicans, you know, including George W. Bush, who did a 180 on us and supported that federal marriage amendment to get reelected in 2004, which, you know, turned a lot of us off. But, you know, I stuck with the party. I want to change the party. Ronald Reagan did a very courageous thing in 1978 when there was an initiative very similar to Proposition 8 on the ballot in California with Proposition 6, then the Briggs Initiative, named after a Republican state senator. Had it passed, it would have banned all gay and lesbian teachers in California and created just a disastrous situation of witch hunts and everything. Well, Reagan, to his credit, 2 years before he's getting ready to run for president again, opposed that and did it very strongly and wrote, you know, op-ed about it and turned that election around. I argue that Ronald Reagan, if he were alive today, and I worked for him for 7 years as a senior political consultant and part of his team, would absolutely support full equality. You know, we're seeing it with Laura Bush and Cindy McCain and the Cheneys. And, you know, I mean, Reagan was, you know, in Hollywood for so long, had a tremendous number of gay friends, as did Mrs. Reagan. And I think he would be all out for marriage equality, for full equality, and be very much against some of these people like, you know, Rick Santorum and Newt Gingrich, who continually beat up on the gay community and just drive so many people, not just, you know, the gay people themselves, but a lot of their friends and families and allies and younger people away from the Republican Party. And I think that's a very short-sighted mistake that these candidates are making.
Here's the number one thing I always think of when it comes to log cabin Republicans or any gays or lesbians considering to vote for a GOP candidate, and I'd like your take on it. Gay marriage, obviously a huge issue, often the top issue with gay voters, at least gays that have a voice in the media. But what if you are, along with being pro-gay marriage, also, say, pro-life or pro-strong military or pro-Israel or pro-low taxes and small government? What do you do? Because hypothetically, if you vote on the gay marriage issue, you could be voting for someone you disagree with on everything but that issue. So what do you do, and what would you advise gay voters to do? Because obviously terrorism, life, taxes, these are a big deal to so many, gays included.
Well, the Republican Party that I grew up with was a little more centrist, but it, was for strong national defense, tough law and order, smaller government, keeping government out of our lives, not all the exceptions. And, so as I tell, people who may like me but might not like my support of gay marriage or might not like the fact that I am pro-choice, I said, look, you're never going to find a candidate you're going to agree with 100% of the time unless you run yourself. And, that is something you have to do. You're never going to find that candidate. I've worked for so many candidates. I'd sit in these editorial boards and through, all their discussions. And these are people who's, I put my life on the line for these candidates and my reputation. I'd be working for them. I didn't agree with everything. Reagan was more conservative than I was, but I knew that he was what this country needed at that particular time, too, to stand up to the Soviet Union, to really, bring this world, bring peace to this world and democracy to so much of the world that didn't have it. And, I didn't agree with his position on abortion, but, I would look to that in another direction because I believed in so much of what he was talking about. So, I think America gets that. You're not going to be in lockstep with a candidate. You want to go with somebody you think is best for the country, who can turn this country around. I campaigned from day one, Kevin, about bringing back the American spirit, and I define that as, the ability to get along and optimism. And these are two great attributes that Ronald Reagan brought to the presidency. He got along with people. He got along with Democrats. He and Tip O'Neill, because he invited Tip O'Neill to the White House early on, became friends and got a lot done in Congress. And that's what's missing. That's what Obama doesn't get. He reached out to the Republican leaders early on. I was told it was about 18 months before he had Mitch McConnell to the White House for just a one-on-one get-together. Well, I would do that with Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi the first week, whether they're the leaders or not, majority leaders or not, and, forge some alliances. And instead of what's happening in Washington now, which is putting each of these 535 members' political careers first, that's all they're concerned about. Let's put the country first, and let's work together. And, I have a unique ability to do that because I've supported Democrats. I live in Southern California. There aren't many Republicans here. And so I'm used to that. And I'm not afraid to support Democrats when I think they're better than Republicans. I am a lifelong Republican. I've only professionally worked for Republicans. But when a Democrat appears better, I would put my partisan feelings aside and vote for the individual. And I think that's the way most of America is.
Now, Sarah Palin, you had a chance to meet her, I believe, twice. Tell me first about what you mentioned, touched on a bit earlier. You met her, 17 years ago now, way before she was governor. And then, of course, your great Frisbee story from this past summer. And also, Fred, what do you think of her?
I have always been a fan. Willis Lyford was working for me. We were doing some governmental affairs work. He was the manager of her lieutenant governor's race. She was running for lieutenant governor of Alaska at the time, and I'm pretty sure I contributed. But she came to a lunch of some business leaders in Anchorage, and I was, I hadn't heard of her. I hadn't heard of Wasilla. I was a little surprised because Willis had arranged for a lot of big speakers, governors, senators, a speaker of the House. Anyway, so I said, what are we doing? What's this? Oh, you'll love her. Trust me. Well, of course, everyone in this lunch of about a dozen people did. She just was so charming and so bright, and just, we all were converted instantly. And I supported her for lieutenant governor, and I was just quite taken by her charm and wit and ability and smarts and everything else. And I have always said, when asked about Sarah Palin, because I'm not as fond of some of the other Republicans running, particularly these individuals that have signed this marriage pledge with the National Organization for Marriage, that I always thought Sarah, who did a nice tweet after Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed, who has just been, I thought, a great force within the Republican Party for bringing those younger people in. I've certainly studied her, seen her in action, and the excitement she brings. I always hoped and said always publicly that she would run this time because I thought we needed that infusion of excitement and her great ability in this race. And that didn't happen, of course. I was disappointed because I thought it would have been a much more interesting campaign. And then as luck may have it, when I was in Iowa for the state fair, at the time I was not allowed in the Fox debate, I was treated in full presidential privileges at the Iowa State Fair, including I was at the Iowa pork producers tent cooking pork chops at the time when she arrived. And it was so funny because the entire fair, and it's a huge property, was so focused. You could just feel this energy and all the excitement, and Sarah moving through with a big entourage and all the people and press and everything. She, of course, upstaged every other candidate, bigger candidates than me. I went up to go say hello. I was going to give her one of my Frisbees, which I've been handing out, kind of a trademark of mine, a California thing, and got a little logo on it. And so I handed her a Frisbee, introduced myself again, and before I could get my whole spiel in, she had signed it with a Sharpie she was carrying and handed it back and wished me good luck. And that was it. So it was pretty quick. But I had an Australian broadcasting company had been following me around all day, so they recorded the whole thing, and of course a couple photographers. So it was a great privilege. I've got it framed and hanging proudly, and I took a picture of it and tweeted it, and it was the Frisbee signing heard around the world. So it was a great joy to see her, and I really am sorry she's not in this contest. She'd make a big difference, and I think that her great spirit and attitude is what this party needs.
Well, Fred Karger, you sound like a guy who believes the GOP is still that bigger tent where there are opposing views amongst party members, and unlike the Democrat Party where it's pretty much, the Obama-Pelosi Reed way or the highway. And we appreciate you being on, and we wish you good luck the rest of the way. Well,
thank you. I'm off to Michigan.
Good luck to you.
Good luck. Thanks, Kevin.
Fred Karger. You can check out his website at fredkarger.com. Now, Palin power. Just a slogan, you say? A catchy phrase? Think again. There's really little doubt that even though she is not a candidate, Governor Palin will greatly affect this race for the White House. Remember when Rick Santorum was polling in single digits? Seems like a lifetime ago, but not too long before his huge Iowa surprise, the former Pennsylvania senator was polling very low, usually in single digits, sometimes in dead last. Then Palin stepped in. She praised Santorum, unprompted. He appeared here on the Palin Update, and what happened? The cash poured in. He surged in the polls and stunned the nation with a Hawkeye State W. Newt Gingrich was down by double digits in some early South Carolina surveys. Then the former speaker was endorsed by Todd Palin. And then the big boost. Sarah Palin said if she were a South Carolinian, she'd vote for Gingrich to keep the race and vetting process going. What happened? Gingrich stormed past the field and won the South's first primary. Coincidence? We think not. Palin power on full display. More to come, for sure. Well, that'll just about do it for this edition of the Palin Update on SaraNet Radio. Be sure to visit saranetradio.net for continuing coverage of Governor Palin. Also, follow us on Twitter at SaraNet Radio, and we're now on Facebook, so make sure you like SaraNet Radio on Facebook. I want to thank everyone here at SaraNet Radio. Thanks to Fred Karger. And thank you for listening today. Please be sure to join us next time for another edition of the Palin Update. I'm Kevin Scholla. Have a pleasant day.